Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are, back again. Another live broadcast right here on today's Kev Baker Show. I want to thank each and every one of you. I would do it individually if I could for tuning into today's broadcast and all the other broadcasts that you turn up in your numbers for. And of course, we're on Truth Frequency Radio, www.tfrlive.com, where we say that silence is consent and we give you protection from deception, something that will become even more relevant as tonight's show progresses. And I've been really looking forward to this broadcast because we're going to be discussing a number of topics that I've been interested in for as long as I can remember. Way back when I was a little child, I know I'm going back a few years now, but I would often stare up at the sky, and a little voice in my head, you know that little voice that we all have, it would often ask, are we alone? Well, that was the start of it for me, really, and it really sparked a personal interest in not only are we alone, but also space in general, UFOs, all that stuff that I like to call the woo right here on the Kev Baker Show. And even before I dove down the rabbit hole into the world of researching alternative topics and looking into all of the stuff that we now cover here on the show, I always had a thirst for more and more information on this particular topic. After starting to listen to shows like Coast to Coast, there was one thing that would always come up when you were discussing anything to do with UFOs and aliens, and that was something that people called disclosure. But what actually is disclosure? And how does it fit in with today's version of ufology? Well, to discuss all this and so much more, I have my good friend and a fellow podcaster. He has his own show, The Secret Teachings, and that is Mr. Ryan Gable. Now, his website is thesecretteachings.info, and his email address, if you want to contact him, is rdgable@yahoo.com. He has 3 books out there, folks, that I urge you to check out. One is called Occult Arcana. The next one, Food Philosophy. And then his latest piece of work, an absolutely massive undertaking Ryan took to put this together, The Technological Elixir. And it's everything, really, that you need to know about these strangest of times that we're moving into as we further go down the road of becoming this technologically advanced civilization. So I urge you to check out his website. He's here with me today. Ryan, my good friend, it's great to have you back on, man. And in recent times, you really have provided me with some of the highlights right here on the Kev Baker Show, because I hate to say it sounds like I'm being big-headed, but we've done some really good work, and for whatever reason it is, you really do seem to bring out the best in me. So I'm really looking forward to tonight's show, brother.
Hey, Kev, I am happy to know that I'm in, I hope, a category with the Geordie Rose interview.
Oh, absolutely, dude. It's like I was telling my good friend the other day, you know, Geordie Rose, obviously it's a name that's quite synonymous in conspiracy circles with everything that we've looked into with the quantum computing, artificial intelligence and stuff like that. But the motto of TFR has always been real people, real radio. And that's why it thrills me just as much to have somebody like yourself on, even people that nobody have ever heard of before, just not ordinary people telling their stories. So absolutely, man. In fact, this might even put Geordie's interview into the shade.
I don't know. That's a lot of hype for me. I think I'll try to do my best, and we'll see where the conversation goes. You mentioned disclosure. What is disclosure to you?
Disclosure to me, it's almost like a unicorn. It's a mythical creature, my friend. We would all love to have the secret documents and everything that the government knows about the subject of ufology and alien life. However, if we were given that moment, you know, the government did come out, be it the president in your country, our prime minister over here, then to take them at face value and believe them after they've lied to us time and time again, it really does fit in with something we call confirmation bias. And the disclosure moment that people are waiting for, if it's anything like that, then I really, really do fear that we would be getting lied to and there would be some bigger game afoot. But that's my take on it. What say you, Ryan?
I have a very similar point of view on it, and it's not something I could sum up in a quick soundbite, but I'll do my best for time's sake. I did a show on this Monday, and I've done several other shows on this the last couple of weeks, and I've talked about disclosure for some time. I've never been an adherent to that, what I call faith. People have a belief that, and I've heard different points of view, different beliefs, that disclosure is everything from the president of the United States on the White House lawn, shaking hands with a gray, to the president simply saying, "We've lied to you, my fellow Americans, aliens are real," to data dumps. I've heard all kinds of different things about disclosure. And what disclosure has essentially, in my view, morphed into is this distant, futuristic prophecy of something that's going to happen, but not right now. We hope it happens right now. Every time there's a news article about a UFO, every time there's a UFO sighting, every time some document is leaked or declassified, for some people, they see that as disclosure. Some people see that as the precursor to disclosure. So all of these different ideas of what disclosure is very concerning for me, specifically because I, like you, have been interested in UFOs and aliens and various related subjects since I was a kid. That was one of the first things I was interested in. And I try to approach that subject matter in a very objective and as unbiased as possible. I'm not trying to prove anything. I just like to look at the information that we have. And in the field of ufology, most people that I've met who are professional take their work very seriously. They're not necessarily looking to prove what they're saying. They're simply doing research, doing an investigation, and then presenting the evidence. And that's an objective form of journalism. Unfortunately, the ufology community, if we may call it that, I know some people don't know what ufology is, but they like UFOs. Some people don't consider themselves in ufology. I'm not putting labels on anybody. I'm just saying the general field of ufology, the study of UFOs, aliens, all the things that come into that subject, which might include the paranormal. That entire field, that entire community is now being overrun and is being overlapped by other things like the New Age movement, if you can call it that, things like QAnon, outright cults. And all of this is coming together under the headline of what was ufology, but now I don't really think there's even a name that we could apply to it. It's a combination of so many different things. And everybody in this group, in this community, have different ideas about different things, which is totally fine. People have ideas that if they take DMT, that's going to initiate them into some cult of like ancient Egypt. I've heard that. I've heard things like disclosure, like I said, is going to be the president shaking hands with a gray alien. So I think the real core of this is a few weeks ago, mid-April of 2019, the United States Navy announced that they were drafting new guidelines for reporting UFOs. And when they announced that, the UFO community, people who were interested in UFOs, they were very excited. They said, look, this is more disclosure. And then a few people said, no, this isn't disclosure. This is a precursor to disclosure. So I went and I had a look at this, the guidelines for reporting UFOs. And what I found from what the Navy actually said was that they're changing their guidelines, but they don't really want to call them UFOs. They'll call them things like unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. And they go into detail about some instances that have occurred, some incidents that have occurred where striker groups for the Navy have been followed by UFOs, and some of the more advanced aircraft have been outmaneuvered to this day by unidentified flying objects. And generally, the Navy doesn't actually keep records of any of this stuff because they're looking for specific things on radar. And so if they don't find something on radar that they're looking for, and it seems like an anomaly, they dump the data. That's what the Navy said. I don't know if that's true, but if that is even remotely true, that means the Navy really doesn't have an idea of what this is either. And so I don't really see this as a form of disclosure. I don't really believe in disclosure. I don't really believe in things like QAnon. I think that all of these things are red herrings. And if you really want to understand ufology, I think you have to go back to semantics. Things like a UFO, it's an unidentified flying object. If you can identify it, it's no longer a UFO. And UFOs are not alien spaceships. Could they be? Sure, but they're not alien spaceships. If we can go into, Kev, the terminology and break it apart and try to understand the language and what people are saying when they say disclosure, when they say they use the acronym UFO, to me, it helps to better solidify a basis for where we're coming from and where we're going with this kind of information, rather than just running around screaming about every declassified document and every UFO sighting of somebody, who saw an orb and, when they took a picture. There are so many different things. Disclosure is so many different things. UFOs are so many different things. I think we all need to take a deep breath and realize that if disclosure is simply the revealing of information that was secret and pertains to UFOs and things like that, then we've had disclosure for a very, very, very long time. Otherwise, if you want to believe it's coming in the future, to me, that's more of a faith-based religion waiting for Jesus to return, or waiting for the rapture or ascension or something like that. And in that capacity, Kev, ufology has turned into a religious cult, I think.
And a lot of it, Ryan, has turned into almost multi-level marketing programs as well. This is something that I've come to realize. But the whole topic, you really hit on a word there that's important, and it's faith. Because it's got to be one of the most difficult subjects for any researcher out there to actually look into and find evidence, tangible evidence that you can put your hands on. A lot of it comes from secret insiders, people's own personal testimony of events or sightings that they've had. And that's not to be derogatory to these people, it's not to insult them. However, for the people like you and I and others out there interested, we have to take a lot of this at people's word. And that is as far as it goes. And this whole kind of UFO, that whole acronym, unidentified flying object, this is something I often shake my head at. And it was our mutual friend, Clyde Lewis, over on Ground Zero, who really kind of was the first one that opened my eyes to the fact that the governments out there, and in particular your government, the Pentagon, stuff like that, they don't even talk about UFOs. They talk about unidentified aerial phenomenon or unidentified aerial vehicles. So straight off the bat, you start to see that there's a serious problem here. And if you're going to the government with freedom of information requests looking for UFOs, they're not lying to you, are they? When they come back and they say, well, no, we actually don't have anything on UFOs, that's literally correct, because they don't term them as unidentified flying objects. And then you hear people talking about UFOs and how they come from this planet or that planet. Well, in some respect, then, you've actually identified what this flying object is, and it's no longer a unidentified flying object, it's a IFO. It's an identified flying object. Whether that person is right about where it comes from or not, they're still identifying what it is. So it's a really, really murky field for anyone who's looking into this. And for the researchers out there who have been doing this over the years, no disrespect to any of them, but it's got to be, like I say, one of the hardest things to present smoking gun evidence on. And like you, I do think disclosure is something that's been going on over a long period of time for those that are willing to dig in and do the research and look for the actual correct documents using the correct terminology to do so.
Certainly, Kev. And, you could have, like the Manhattan Project, 15, 20, 30 people with full knowledge of what's happening. And every other person that's participating in the program is simply doing a minor job, and they think that's all that it is. They're building a spark, they're building, a spark plug, they're building a fuse, they're building a remote control, they're building something, all part of a much larger mechanism. Since compartmentalization, of course. I would suspect that there might be maybe a couple dozen people in all of government that have any idea what the UFO phenomena is really all about. Now, I could be wrong, but just go with me for a second. If that's the case, when people say government, well, that includes the Postal Service. I don't think postal workers are covering up alien life. That includes federal agencies that don't have anything to do with intelligence gathering or monitoring the skies for objects, or astronomy, NASA. Like there are so many different elements to government. So we have to move away from using words like government cover-ups, because it's not really a government cover-up. There are people in government. There are agencies and people running agencies that cover things up. Government doesn't cover it up. Government is just a label for hundreds of thousands of people and agencies that work together, and they're not all working to conceal UFOs. And what you said, what made me think about UFOs as an acronym, if we can get past the UFO and get to the IFO, then we can do a little bit more research and try to determine, are these alien spaceships? What exactly are they? To me, I know a lot of people say, well, that's just semantics. Well, it's important because if you want any form of credibility for the field of ufology and for the study of this very, very provable phenomena, although a lot of it is just people's imaginations and misinterpretations of things, but there's a tremendous amount of information that is completely unidentifiable. Even the official disinformation campaign Project Blue Book, they found about 10% of sightings were credible in the sense that they could not determine what they were. So if you want any form of credibility for this field and you want to be taken seriously, rather than using the acronym UFO and identifying that as part of some alien, fleet or armada that's coming to Earth to invade, I don't know what people think. But instead of saying UFO, instead of playing around with the words, UFO, the acronym, is like conspiracy theory. We have to move away from that terminology. And if you want the scientific community to investigate this more fully, maybe people don't, but if you want the acknowledgement of mainstream science, which is usually biased and pseudoscientific in nature, but if you want an investigation of this done on a large scale and you want some kind of actual, let's say, disclosure, then we have to understand that there's more to this than just silly acronyms and silly insiders and whistleblowers who have no evidence for what they're saying. Almost all of that, Kev, is, to me, smoke and mirrors. And you're 100% right. The Navy, the Air Force, the government, in quotations, they don't have documentation on UFOs because they don't call them UFOs. The Pentagon did a $25 million study that they ended in 2012 studying UFOs, but they spend billions studying unidentified aerial phenomena. That, to me, I know it seems so simple, and I know it's a matter of semantics, but it is so important because if we don't understand that, we're not going to be able to move on. We're going to stagnate in this field of disinformation, and it's just like the words conspiracy theory. It's meant to be dismissive, and UFO today as an acronym is as dismissive as conspiracy theory. So if you want credibility and you want some people to work with you and understand what you're saying and do a little bit of investigation into something rather than just simply writing it off and dismissing it, we need to understand the language and we need to be able to approach this more professionally rather than turning ufology into some weird cult where everybody is drinking the Kool-Aid, which is, again, as you said and as I said, that's where this is going very, very quickly and dangerously so in some cases.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I want to go back to what you were talking about there. This Pentagon program, I think it was $22 or $25 billion, something like that, ran for 5 years, and it was called the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. Now, first we got told about this, I believe it was in December 2017, and it was a character called Luis Elizondo who came forward. He had previously been working as part of the ATIP program. And this is my speculation right here. Let me just state that categorically. This is me connecting dots that may or may not be there. But ever since that time, we've almost seen a change, a real 180 by the media. Because up until that point, it was very common any talk of aliens would also be accompanied with backing music from the X-Files, or they would roll out silly little green men, stuff like that. But then when ATIP was announced and we had Elizondo coming forward, we had CNN, we had all the major media acting in an entirely different way, like this was a very serious subject altogether. Now, when that first happened and we seen them teaming up with something called To the Stars Academy, which is fronted by Tom DeLonge, a long-time ufology kind of character. He was in the band Blink 182. He's always been interested in UFOs like you and I. But this ATIP program and the characters that came from that, Elizondo being one of them, they kind of hitched their wagon to Tom DeLonge and they set up this thing called To the Stars Academy. Now, things went stagnant over 2018, but now here we are back again with the Navy now coming out with this news about the way that pilots and personnel are to report unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomenon, if we're to, use the correct terminology. And I don't know about you, Ryan, I'll get your take on this. But when we were talking about being very worried if there was ever this official disclosure that came from government entities, I think there's some kind of psyop, some game being played right now. Now, that doesn't mean that everything they're telling us is false, because the best disinformation is woven in amongst truth. And it's just my gut feeling that for whatever reason, all of this is all linked together, and it's for a purpose. Now, I can't tell you what that purpose is yet, Ryan. I don't know what they're trying to do, how they're trying to program people, why they're trying to program people into this kind of mindset. But what do you think of all of this, the ATIP to the Stars Academy? Do you think this recent story is connected to all of that in any way?
A couple of days ago, I went to a UFO festival in New York State, Hudson Valley area, Pine Bush, the city of Pine Bush, called the Pine Bush UFO Festival. And I set up my books, Kev, and I sold some books, and I talked to a lot of people that day. And one of the things that came up more than anything else was disclosure. And when people found out where I'm living, they said, "Oh, you must know Richard Dolan." And I said, "I've met Richard Dolan. Richard Dolan is a nice guy. He gave me a free book when I met him. He autographed it for me. He gave me a cell phone number to do a radio interview. And he had some issues with that radio interview, so we rescheduled. And then we had to reschedule again and again, and he blew me off, so I decided not to pursue the interview anymore. And that was several years ago, back in like 2015, 2016. So I said, he's a nice guy, but we really didn't get a chance to do an interview, and I'm not really pursuing it. I'd rather do my own research. I've heard what people have to say, like Richard Dolan. No issue with the guy. I just don't really feel like I need to talk to him. And I had these people, some people looked at me kind of really weird, and you could tell that they were thinking, and maybe I'm presuming too much, but you could tell that they were thinking, but Richard Dolan is the expert, so you should talk to him. And I heard that a lot. I hear that a lot, not just at little events like this, but I hear that a lot. You should talk to this person. They're an expert. But they're saying the same thing that all the other experts say. And all the experts are saying the things that the non-experts are saying. And I go to conferences and I hear people talking about how this is the year of disclosure and how we're going to get disclosure. And if you just go to this one presentation, you're going to get disclosure there. And I go to it, and it's the same presentation I've heard 500 times, and it's the same information we've had since 1947 or maybe before. It's nothing new unless you've never heard of this kind of thing before, and then it's maybe new to you. But to the field, it's not new. It's not disclosure. So I said, in general, on my show Monday, I did a whole show on this, on the secret teachings. I said, you're not going to get disclosure from Richard Dolan. You're not going to get disclosure from Greer. You're not going to get disclosure from a radio host. You're not going to get disclosure from me, and you're not going to get disclosure from Tom DeLonge. You can create organizations and groups, and you can lobby Congress, and you can send in FOIA requests. You're not going to get disclosure. Some people might think you've had disclosure, but all of these things with experts and people that have inside information, to me, Kev, it just seems like a giant circus. It's a giant circus, and I'm not buying tickets to it because I'm reading what the Air Force and the Navy are saying. I'm looking at the things like Project 1794, which was a program by the Air Force to build a flying disc. And they unveiled that in a tech magazine several years ago, long before all the years of disclosure things started. And I have that printed out. I put that in one of my original books. And then I saw this thing with the Navy the other day about changing the guidelines. And at the same time, they revealed a patent that they had on a bizarre flying object that they said it was a UFO, but the Navy had patented it and they were going to build it. And I thought, how is that disclosure, but all of the other various releases of information were not disclosure? How is it that if every time we have a story in the news or a declassified document, that's disclosure, but then the next time it happens, that's also disclosure? What is it? Is it disclosure of that particular document or disclosure of the overall agenda? And the most important thing, I think, is what you said, Kev. I think the second thing you said on the show tonight. If you don't trust that the government as a whole is telling you the truth, why would you then trust when they release information and tell you This is the website you go to, FBI.gov, CIA.gov /UFO files /X files. How can we trust?
We'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
I'm Gable from the Secret Teachings podcast. You can catch that over on Fringe FM. He's also got a website by the same name, thesecretteachings.info. He's here with me today, and undoubtedly, this is one show where myself and Ryan are guaranteed to ruffle some feathers out there. Pardon the pun, exactly. You've got a nice t-shirt on today, Ryan. What's that you're wearing there?
Yeah, this is my Blue Rooster Robot Chicken shirt, and they have a message for mankind. You can see down there at the bottom. It is the website, and I'm going to be wearing this to Contact in the Desert, and I have a feeling it might be like wearing a MAGA hat to a Democrat rally. You might get punched. That might happen to me.
One of my regular listeners in the chat room, he fears for your safety when you go to the Contact in the Desert, because he says that possibly the Alliance might just take you away, my friend.
I didn't think it's a great point. I completely forgot about the Alliance.
The Alliance. But disclosure is what we're talking about tonight, and the current state of ufology, or the state of ufology. I don't know what you could really call it right now. And before the break, we were talking about some of the recent news that's been coming out. We've had the Navy changing their guidelines on the whole UFO reporting subject. And it used to be, Ryan, it would almost be career suicide for commercial or military pilots to talk about anything that was unidentified that they might have witnessed in the skies above them or around them. And you see how things are starting to change now, thanks to the ATIP program being, air quotes here, disclosed to the Stars Academy. And with all the talk of aliens, UFOs, and the way it's going right now, I mean, something's changed, and I don't think it's bringing us any closer to that truth moment. I'm not going to call it disclosure moment, because we kind of touched on that before the break, but there's almost something that's like a sea change. I can't put my finger on it. It's something I've been trying to work out for some time. And then we're also seeing ufology being blended and merged with other topics out there, like you touched upon as well, QAnon being one of them. What do you make of all of this? Where's this all going?
I'm not really a business guy, but I know in businesses do like marketing tests, and they try to determine what, like, let's say a business opens up in downtown in the city, and they want to determine what kind of demographic they have so that they can market better to them and they can get those products in the store. And so even though they might not typically carry product A, if they know that 90% of their customers will buy it somewhere else since they don't have it, then they might start carrying product A. That's kind of how I see the field of ufology. And it's not really ufology as a field of study, but it's the people that get grouped into it, presenters and authors, and I use those words kind of loosely. They do a marketing test. They see what works with people. They see, okay, people really like this QAnon thing, so let's throw that into the pot of soup. And then they're stirring it, and they say, okay, what else can we use? Oh, people like really obscure whistleblower stories. Let's throw some of that in there, like Emeril Lagasse, bam. And then they keep stirring it, and they say, what else can we add to this? Oh, how about some pedophilia? That's really popular. Let's throw that into the pot. And then before you know it, you've got this weird mix of people that are highly, highly uninformed, and they know very little information about a lot of things. And because of that lack of information, they merge it all together, and it creates like this, I'm not sure what the proper term is, but it's almost like it's like a sub-reality. And then they insert themselves into it, and they draw this audience. It's like a virtual reality simulation of what they want the world not to be. But if the world's like this, even though it's horrible, then they can be the person that exposes it. It kind of reminds me of that episode of Black Mirror, the Star Trek one, where the guy creates this alternate virtual world where he kind of is God. He can do whatever he wants. That's how I see some of these people. They create like this alternate universe. They've got all this secret information, and then people flock to them. No pun intended again. People flock to them, and then they feed the people what they want to hear. In this case, it might be blue chickens, or it might be QAnon, it might be UFOs, it might be pedophilia. And I'm not saying it's that people want to hear about children being abused, or they want to hear specifically about blue birds, but these obscure whistleblowers and obscure experiences that you can't really prove or disprove. I mean, some things you can disprove, but you really can never prove it. And so you have to rely on faith that the person is telling you the truth. And they're feeding you just a little bit, just a little bit, just a little bit. And when you say, can I have some more? They take it away and they say, no, not unless you pay me $50 to ask me a question. They're con artists, the people that do that kind of a thing. Meanwhile, I go to a conference like Contact in the Desert, and we joke around and say con in the desert. And I have a really good time going to places like that, going to events. And a majority of the speakers that I know personally are really nice people. And although I disagree with some things and they disagree with me on some things, I don't think they're charlatans. But there are a handful of people who have a lot of power because of the influence of who dumps the most money into a conference or into an author to write a book, and then they have publicists to promote it. And those are the people that tend to grab the most attention because they're marketed, they're promoted. And then they market their material and they try to determine what is more popular, what is more interesting. Like Jordan Sather, for example, I got him into a David Wilcock talk last year, trying to be nice. I just said, would you like to come in with the secret teachings? He looked at me strange, and then he came in and he didn't say anything to me. He walked away like it was weird. And now this year he's a featured speaker somehow. And he's got like presentations and looking at what he's done over the last couple of years, he didn't touch on certain things until they became popular. And then he became an expert on QAnon. And because of the right strategy and marketing and selling yourself, he's on Comedy Central. He's on all of these big radio shows. He's got a massive Twitter following. People are flocking to him. And I just think, Kev, and I'd like to ask you this, if you just started walking around Scotland and telling people that you met red robot chickens, how many people do you think would start following you and throwing money at you? You think that would be something that would happen, or do you think people would probably maybe have you committed?
In Scotland, that would definitely not be a good move. Pardon the pun again, but that just wouldn't fly for very long whatsoever. And when it comes to somebody like Jordan Sather, there's a bigger backstory here. And let me go back in time, a bit of my own journey, really. And because I've been interested in these topics, I would say it'd probably be around the time of 2009, 2010, and that date could be wrong, but one of the major platforms that you would find a lot of this information on, a lot of these whistleblowers would come forward to, was something called Project Camelot with Kerry Cassidy and Bill Ryan.
You mean Scam-a-lot?
That's exactly what I was going to get into. However, at the time, because I was kind of wide-eyed and bushy-tailed and they were telling me all of this quite fantastical stuff, some of the guests that were on there, it was really exciting, and I really thought we were starting to, see behind the scenes, get to some of the truth. And this is where I first came across David Wilcock. Now, he had a really influential movie at the time, documentary. It was back when Google Video, you could go on there before they had bought over YouTube, and one of their number one videos at the time was David Wilcock, Enigma 2012. Now, this was a 2 or 3 hour long presentation, and a lot of it, was evidentially based. He would talk about things like water having memory, and he would show the work of Professor Inamoto and the water experiments with intention, stuff like that. He would show you some of what is now classed as ancient alien evidence, and it was really fascinating. But one thing that he was speaking about back then, that he still speaks about today, is this alliance and something that we call mass arrests imminent. He was always saying that this cabal, these people who had been putting the screw on all the kind of truth and stopping the information flow from getting to the public, this cabal that was out there, they would be rounded up. It was imminent. There was going to be mass arrests coming. Now, over time, I started to see how David would come out with sensational information, A lot of it coming from faceless, nameless, deep inside whistleblowers, as he would call them. And every time a prediction of mass arrests or something big happening would come and go, David would disappear off the scene. And maybe a couple of months would go by and he would come back again and he would start writing on his blog. And then he started talking a lot more about ascension, stuff like this. Again, now we're starting to see how New Agey kind of speak was getting merged with secret space programs and all the rest of it. And eventually, you know, he ended up with his own TV show over on Gaia. Now, Gaia is something that used to be called Gaiam TV, and they used to cover topics like yoga, ascension, New Age stuff, but they rebranded and went down the road of cosmic disclosure, secret space programs, all the kind of stuff that we would associate with modern day ufology in its current state and form. Well, it was at that point, round about then, we had David Wilcock introducing somebody to the scene called Corey Good. Now, Corey Good came forward with an absolutely fascinating story of how he had been part of a secret space program where he had been taken out of his bed one night, taken away into space, onto the moon, I think it was, and then further out afield, and ended up in space as a super soldier for 20 years. He came back, and only 5 minutes or so had passed, and he was back in his bed again. And he was one of the major characters on the scene. Now, he started talking about something called the Sphere Being Alliance, and this is where our friends, the Blue Chicken, or the Blue Avians, come into things. And the Blue Avians, according to Corey, were a species of beings that had come to the planet. They had put a protective shield not only around this planet, but the entire solar system. And Corey was basically humanity's ambassador to these secret meetings. He'd be taken off-world in the middle of the night and go to these secret off-world meetings with this alliance that we keep hearing about. Well, in the background, while all of this was going on, Corey Good and David Wilcock started up something called Corey's Kids. Now, this was basically a workshop, a training school where youngsters could go along and were basically taught all about the secret space stuff. And not only that, they were kind of encouraged and trained in the art of social media, taking to that, making videos. And this is where Mr. Jordan Sather came along. And Jordan ended up with a blog, small blog. And of course, not much money can be made through writing on a blog, as you know yourself, Ryan. And he ended up on YouTube. Now, his channel, it was quite a good channel. You'd be talking about some out there stuff. You know, however, he was kind of maybe 5,000-10,000 subscribers until QAnon came along. And now he's up near somewhere. I haven't checked him recently. It's not somebody I watch anymore per se, but I believe he's over a couple of 100,000 subscribers on there. And when you start to equate that into ad revenue and all the rest of it, it's a lot of money being made. And he's the link between the merger of this thing called QAnon that we mentioned earlier on and what we're talking about today. Secret space programs, blue chicken cults. And it was the same kind of multi-level marketing that you could see Wilcock and his crowd using, and also in the QAnon community. And then it was back in September last year, we had Wilcock on his blog coming out talking about mass arrests imminent. The Alliance were going to round them up. And then lo and behold, just 1 month later, less than a month later, we started to see QAnon talking about hashtag SSP, disclosure, stuff like this. And that was the merger in my mind of these two separate entities. However, these two separate entities are targeting a specific demographic. Now, you'll hear QAnon pushers, and in particular Mr. Sather, saying boom anytime big news comes along. And that boom, it just sounds like it's really good for effect, right? Big news, boom. But it's also a bit of an inside joke, because the target group that they're aiming for are what are referred to as the boomers. And when you look at this, you look at the kind of behind the scenes, these people are maybe a little less internet savvy. And this is not, again, not being insulting, but they maybe don't have the knowledge to maybe go and search for their own information. They don't know how to do deeper research on the internet. And they're taking a lot of this stuff at face value and paying for the privilege to hear more and to keep these stories coming at them. And this is where I personally feel you start to see the con taking place. And there's a lot of players at work here. But definitely, I think we can look at Gaia as being one of the major pushers of this kind of alternative secret space program. And in my mind, what this really does, it really muddies the water, first off, for anyone who is doing genuine research. If there are any genuine actual whistleblowers out there, you know, they must be looking at the current state of things and thinking, well, where do I turn to? Where do I go with this information? Because all of this stuff out there right now, it's kind of a back crap crazy. So this is why when we were speaking today on Skype and text, I was kind of bringing up QAnon, other subjects, the cult-like kind of mentality that we see forming around some of these characters as well. Because anytime you try to question people like David Wilcock, Corey Good, Jordan Sather, then their followers, they have this absolutely adverse reaction to anyone questioning anything that they say. And that's one of the classic telltale signs of, you know, a cult in the making. Now, I've been rambling on there for a while, Ryan. There's a lot I've said, but, you know, just whatever you want to add to that, whatever your feelings are on that. I'm not saying that you share these feelings with me, but that's the observations I've been making. And in recent times, there's been more and more people now coming forward to say, look, that there really is something dodgy going on here. And a lot of this stuff that's been pushed by these characters, it is absolutely based in fiction. Nothing else. It is pure fantasy, all for the purpose of making a buck.
That was an excellent, excellent, excellent description of all of this that's been going on for some time, Kev. You know, from the X-Files, the opening, I want to believe the truth is out there, the Mulder poster. I think I want to believe is at the foundation of people that are not necessarily in that boomer generation, people that want to believe. It includes the boomer generation, but the people that follow and criticize anyone who asks questions and criticizes the cult leader, they have an idea that they've been lied to. A lot of us feel that we've been lied to. We've been misled. We've been conditioned and brainwashed through education. We haven't been told the truth about what we are as human beings, things like the soul, the spirit. We haven't been told the truth about reality, as if there is some truth. So my point is, most of us have distrust in authority. Though we have distrust in authority, it's kind of like a parent. Although our parent might be abusive and aggressive, and they might be a really bad parent, there's still that feeling that we want to please that person. We want to please the parental figure. We kind of feel ourselves, although we don't identify it, in a form of Stockholm syndrome, where though we're kind of held captive, we still feel a connection to the captor, in this case, using the parental figure as an example. And so if we look at government as a whole, we look at mass media, we look at the major institutions that have conditioned us and programmed us, and we think they're not telling us the truth. They're lying to us. So that must mean anybody who disagrees with them, anybody who has a different perspective than quote unquote government, must be telling the truth. And so if someone says that they were abducted by aliens, that must be true, because the government's been covering up alien life since at least 1947 and UFOs and all that. So people that saw blue chickens and people that were abducted and probed, they have to be telling the truth. And the danger there is taking one authority and replacing it with another authority, taking the mainstream, mainline authority of government or whatever it might be, not believing them, and so you turn to another authority to give you the truth, whatever that might mean to you. And people have such a desire to believe that they will then believe anything to the contrary of the official narrative, which is very dangerous. And any form of cover-up, any form of organized social manipulation is going to exploit that, knowing that if the CIA or the FBI, if there really are people trying to conceal UFOs, what they're going to do is they're going to use the momentum of the alternative anything against that community to further spread disinformation. And so the UFO community, whatever you might want to call it, you're told. I've heard things like this. You're told to go to like the FBI's website, go to the CIA's website, using those as credible platforms, and that they have UFO documents there. And they do. And I went to the CIA's website. They have a section on UFO documents. They have 10. They have more than that, but there's a section where they have 10. And they say, these are the most credible documents. They tell you what's credible. And they say, these are 5 that Fox Mulder would want to get his hands on, and these are 5 that Dana Scully would want to get her hands on, playing with that TV connection. And that's what we're supposed to believe. Though we don't trust government, we don't trust the CIA, we trust when they release information that confirms our bias. So there's that weird parental figure Stockholm syndrome thing going on. And then you have to look at things like the mass arrests as an example. These predictions, mass arrest, mass arrest, mass arrest, and then they don't happen. And then it's kind of like an end of the world prediction. The end of the world's going to be, next week at 5 p.m. on Friday. And I know that because I read that in the Bible. I dropped acid, and then I took the Bible and I buried it. And when I opened it up after I buried it and I had dug it out of the ground, I opened up right to a page where it said 5. And I knew 5 p.m. Friday, that's the end of the world. Friday starts with an F, so that must mean it's the end of the world. And then it doesn't happen, just some random stupid thing. It doesn't happen. And so then they say, well, we miscalculated. I didn't read that right. What I really meant was next month. What I really meant was next year. And it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Just like disclosure, just like the rapture, just like ascension. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And that's how you keep people on the hook wanting more. Because otherwise, like I do, if I just do a radio show and I say, you're not going to get disclosure here. Disclosure is a circus. It's a joke. It's in a lot of ways, it's turned into a psyop. Well, the people that want disclosure, the people that are on the hook, they fall off the hook for me. They don't want anything to do with what I'm saying because I'm not providing them with information that confirms their bias. So they go to the experts who will regurgitate the information over and over and over and over again and confirm their bias and make money off of telling people what they want to hear, which is what I think QAnon is. I think it's a self-organizing collective intelligence. I think it's partly connected to the CIA. I think it's a bot. And when you pump information into the internet, when you pump information into algorithms like Netflix, it knows what you want to watch, or it suggests things it thinks you might want to watch. So because people want to know about a secret space program and aliens because they don't trust NASA or the government, what does QAnon and what do these bots and what do these whistleblowers and, well, supposed whistleblowers and people that have inside information do? They do the exact same thing that Netflix does. They know you like horror movies, so they suggest horror movies. They know you like alien movies. They suggest alien movies. They know you like a good secret cover-up, so they suggest cover-ups. They suggest inside access. They suggest they've been taken to the moon. They've met blue chickens. Not to say that blue rooster robot chickens don't exist. Maybe they exist in some dimension, Kev.
I mean, you think about it, Ryan, all those trillions of galaxies out there, and then all the stars and all the planets that spin off from that. I mean, statistically, if there's alien life out there on various planets, then maybe, like you say, on one of these planets or in another dimension, it's absolutely feasible that there could be blue chicken people. I don't know, but not the blue chicken cult that we're having sold from Corey Good, David Wilcock, Sather, et al. And the fact that you have to pay to learn more about the blue chicken cult as well, that's a big kind of red flag. Now, don't get me wrong, folks. People will say, well, Kev, you're a hypocrite. You try to make a living out of what you do. I most certainly do, but I'm not making false promises to you. What you see from me is what you get. And when I'm speculating, I'll tell you I'm speculating. But I won't ever try to play into that confirmation bias and come up with some fantastical kind of unseen, unnamed source who's given me all of the kind of information that I know people want to hear. And that's the real difference here. And that's why, ufology for me, there's still a big section of ufology. It's just the way it should be. People asking questions, people wanting to know more. However, it's just this one aspect of it. This is one kind of corner of it that has become so murky that it's important for people like me and Ryan to speak the way that we are. And more people are speaking out about this. We've had Jay Widener recently joining somebody called Groovy Bean over on YouTube. And Jay is somebody behind Gaia TV. And of course, Gaia TV is what helped launch Corey Good into almost the mainstream, you know. But yet even he now is coming out 2 years afterwards and saying, look, this story with the blue avians, the blue chickens, it's absolute bunkum, you know.
Yeah, and then furthermore, people like Emery Smith dissecting 3,000 aliens. You know, when you look at something like marketing, like I mentioned, there was a really great, tons of great George Carlin, you know, bits over the years. But he talked about how governments rename things. The Department of War is the Department of Defense now. Radiation is a sunshine ray. That's how marketing works. You want to provide an image for your audience. A lot of radio hosts do that. They stay mysterious. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But I read the bio of Jordan Sather recently, and his bio now says he's a global educator. And maybe we can talk about that when we come back.
Oh,
marketing.
yes, please. 1 hour down, one.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
Hour number 2 is upon us already on today's show. I don't want it to end because I've got my good friend, fellow podcaster and researcher here, Ryan Gable. And of course, you can find his work over at thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. He's got a podcast of the same name. It's on Fringe FM. He's been on Clyde Lewis probably more times than I have. We're both big fans of Clyde. And, you know, just recently when I done the show with Geordie Rose, it lost me a ton of subscribers because it didn't confirm the biases that a lot of people already hold close to their heart. And here I am again, only weeks later, and I can probably feel subscribers flocking away from my channel because, yet again, this is going to ruffle people's feathers. They don't want to hear this, and that's no criticism of anyone who has been following any of this information. Let me be really clear on that. You know, there's some really clever marketing techniques at play here, and that's why so many people have really bought into this, literally. Now, we were looking at one of the characters that's connected to all of this stuff before the break. We brought up Jordan Sather. I've been quite outspoken about Jordan, and I know I shouldn't speak ill of other hosts or other researchers out there, but it's important to do so. Because for anyone new coming to alternative information, like people have been in recent years, I fear that they might get a taste of some of this stuff, be it QAnon, be it blue chickens, and when they eventually realize, when they see that these failed predictions come and go, and it's the same story regurgitated, maybe with different characters, different dates, things like that, I fear they might step back and look at the alternative media on the whole in a very dim light indeed. And that's something that I want to prevent. Because it doesn't matter, there's nothing wrong in the fact if you've gone down this road with the blue chickens or you've followed QAnon, stuff like that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. A, you've been targeted by a very slick, a very well presented product. And B, you know, I've been there. When I first woke up, you want to believe. Like we were talking about with the X-Files, you literally want to believe this stuff because, again, you know that you've been lied to for years, and it's so fantastical, and it's actually quite exciting. And this is why I look at it almost like being a modern-day version of online Dungeons and Dragons, where we can take part in what they call a LARP, a live-action role-play. And we're going to talk now about some of these marketing techniques that some of these characters use. And Ryan, we're talking about Jordan Sather before the break. And one thing I've noticed Jordan doing in recent times is almost acting like the high school professor or a university professor or something. He's got the glasses on. He's got the whiteboard behind him. He's got his bullet points. He's got his nice warm cup of tea because, you know, it's nice and warm atmosphere. Come in and sit with me and I'll educate you all. And that in itself, you know, that's almost like making yourself the authoritative figure, despite the fact you've got absolutely nothing to back up any of your claims with. Have you noticed this kind of techniques at work?
I certainly have, and I'd like to also address what you said. I know for people who have never heard my broadcast before, and maybe they've never heard your broadcast before, this isn't myself and or you sitting together and criticizing other people to do it. We're not criticizing people because it's fun. I'm not criticizing people because I don't have anything else to do. I'm critiquing people that I know firsthand behind the scenes are con artists, scammers, and full of crap. I know that David Wilcock has personally tried to blackball me and succeeded in some ways from attending certain conferences. One, Contact in the Desert, I can get back into because I know some people, but he has told people that if I attend, he won't attend, not to have me speak or not to have me attend certain conferences. So for me, it's somewhat personal. But beyond that, the marketing aspect of this is very important. That's a great observation with Sather. He's kind of got this professor thing going on. And by the way, he's like 2 years younger than I am, too. So he's an up-and-coming global educator. That's what he calls himself, a global educator. You know, if I did that, I would think, you know, that is a really arrogant thing to say. I don't call myself like a global radio host. I'm just a radio host. That's what I do. If you're an educator, okay, then you're just an educator. I mean, Kev, you educate people, you're an educator. But when you put that extra word on there, it makes it sound nicer. It makes it sound cleaner. It makes it sound more professional. It's like when you're kind of dressed up, but then you throw on the nice, coat, and then you look really, really slick. And that's what these people are doing. They're throwing on the extra layer. They're adding the extra word, and then it sounds better to say global educator. Let me give you another example. I did a show where I just simply made an observation. I know objectivity is rare nowadays, but I tried to make an observation of someone like Laura Eisenhower, who I've met several times. And I said, Laura Eisenhower's real name was Bradshaw, but she took on the Eisenhower name. She's part of the family, but she took on the name because it would give her credibility. I mean, if I was related to a president, I'd probably take the last name too. If I liked it. So she took on the last name, and now that gives her credibility. I've spent time with that woman in private, in like VIP areas. I don't know what that woman is talking about when she opens her mouth. It's like she took every popular hashtag off of Twitter and YouTube, and she somehow strung them into a sentence, and then she just repeats that sentence over and over again. Now, I'm not attacking somebody. I'm just simply saying if you listen carefully to what these people are telling you, you can tell a lot of the times it's nonsense. When they literally sit there and they say, the aliens were named Logitech. Yeah, they were named Logitech. And I'm just looking at the mouse on my desk. And people eat that crap up because they're authority figures, because your name is Eisenhower, so you must have inside information. And so I looked at her bio recently, and her bio now says she is a galactic historian. I tried to look that up at universities. I can't find a university, Kev, in the States. Maybe they offer that in Scotland. You might have to look. That offers a galactic history course. What is galactic history, man?
I'm just sitting here shaking my head, dude. Galactic historian, eh?
Yeah.
Good job if you can get it. It's a good job if you can get it,
Yeah, it is. You probably get tenure with that. Really good benefits.
When I was in the military, somebody that was a bit out there, off their head, they would call you Oslo. Outer Space Liaison Officer. I think a lot of these people are Oslos.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great title. So it's basically marketing. I mean, we could talk about this all night. We could get into some other areas. I think we should, but it's marketing. It's putting the extra word next to the title. Like, I'm a global radio host. I mean, I'd have to hit myself if I called myself a global educator and a galactic historian. I just feel like an a-hole.
Now, you can guarantee, folks, that in the next couple of days, myself and Ryan will probably be added to Jordan Sather's shill list.
I'm already on it.
You already on there, dude? Oh, I'm envious. I'm envious. I tried my hardest by, making blue avian pictures and photoshopping him into it to see if I could join the ranks of the elite people that call them out. But
you might be on your own list. He might have created a separate list for Kev Baker.
Well, here's the thing about lists. And people don't take a word that myself and Ryan are saying for granted. Please, please, please go and do your own research into all of this because the information is out there from, like Ryan saying here, he knows some of these characters personally. And just recently it came to light that Mr. Sather and Mr. Good had a secret Facebook group. And what they were doing in there was they were targeting or telling their followers to target anyone who was saying anything that countered their narrative, anyone that came out and called any of them out, anyone speaking derogatory about any of them. And it got to the point of they actually doxed a couple of people who had been calling out some of this nonsense. Somebody I really like on YouTube is a guy called Joe from the Carolinas. Now, Joe is one of the most down-to-earth, common sense, evidence-based researchers into secret space, the AB paranormal, as he calls it, all the mysteries that the likes of myself and Ryan like to get into. And he started calling out the Blue Chicken Cult, and Corey Good tried to trademark, I believe he did trademark the term SSP. Now, for Joe's troubles in pointing this out and calling them out, they doxed that young guy. Now, Joe works as a health professional who works alongside basically terminally ill cancer patients. And at the orders of Good and Sather, this troll army that they've got, very much like a cult, right? Been instructed what to do just because people have spoken bad about their leaders. They actually started to phone up Joe's work and really caused that guy a whole heap of hassle. You know, doxing is releasing people's private information, stuff that, you know, telephone numbers, addresses, place of work, stuff like that. Now tell me, folks, if that isn't nefarious and if that doesn't set off alarm bells in people's heads, it really should. And don't believe a word that we've said about Corey Good. Go and do your own research. And Project Avalon, I mentioned Project Camelot earlier on, and that was Kerry Cassidy and Bill Ryan. Now, they actually went their separate ways. One was Project Camelot, the other one Project Avalon. And on the Project Avalon forums, you'll see a really interesting thread on who is Corey Good. And before Corey Good came forward with all of his fantastical stories that just seem to keep on growing over time, what was discovered was that Corey had been very active on the forums, on Camelot and on Avalon. And funnily enough, when he came forward with his story, it incorporated a lot of the information that Corey had been commenting on in the forums before he ever became a whistleblower. Now, I'm speculating here, as does everyone else on that forum, because we can't say for certain, but it seems to me, Ryan, like he cherry-picked, like you say. They pick the parts of the stories that people really resonate with, and then they string together their own fantastic story off the back of that. But again, and I know you'll second me on this, we don't want people to take us at face value. We want them to do their own research into this, and it is all out there. You see, the demographic, back to that, the people that they target, they know that these people would rather just listen to the Sathers of this world, listen to the Goods and get handed the information as opposed to putting the time in, or possibly they might not know where to look for this kind of information. So that's just something I felt that, you know, probably good to get out there as well, Ryan.
Yeah, certainly, Kev. I'll tell you that you as a radio broadcaster and myself as a radio broadcaster, we have, and you don't have to follow it, but we have a moral obligation, we have an ethical obligation, and I think it's a common sense obligation to provide listeners with information that is as credible as we reasonably can determine. And if we have evidence that we can print out, that we can hold, pictures, documents, then it's even more credible when we look at whatever that content might be. And so I would just like, as an example, to give you a piece of information that I have sitting here in front of me. And I know that not all listeners can see this, but for the video, you'll be able to see what I'm holding up. And let me just read the title of this for people that are listening on radio. If I talk about on my show something like weather control and weather modification, I don't say that I have insiders that fed me information, but I can't prove where that information's coming from or where the insiders are coming from. I don't say that the Alliance told me this. They contacted me in my sleep last night. Here's what I do, Kev. I have a massive archive that is literally hundreds of, maybe millions of pages at this time. And I go get things like this. Here's a U.S. patent for weather modification for cloud seeding going back to 1948. So there's a U.S. patent. I have a copy of that, one of literally hundreds of thousands of documents I have. When I tell someone that there was a treaty signed in the 1970s for weather control prohibition, especially for the military use of weather control, I can actually show you the document from the State Department's website, where recently the State Department in the United States and the United Nations removed this from their website and dumped it into an archive where you couldn't find it unless you knew the exact terminology to plug into their search engine to find it. So they didn't cover it up. They just removed it and sent it somewhere else. I have documents like that beyond anything I can even remember. I come across things sometimes I forget that I had them. That's what my show is based on. Whether it's weather control, genetically modified foods, I can show you the studies. Here's another example. I can show you the study from the Environmental Sciences of Europe where they say there's no scientific consensus on GMO safety. The point is, whether it's UFOs, genetically modified food, weather control, QAnon, whatever the case might be, I am providing literal, hard documentation for this content. And then when you figure out the pattern of how these things work and how language is used to obscure facts and how opinions are promoted as facts, and then when you have power to promote your opinion as fact, then you take other people who have facts and documents and you promote that as opinion, as opposition. And so if I sit here and I provide quality content as a moral and ethical obligation, it's very discrediting to what I'm doing when someone else is doing the very opposite, not for necessarily a nefarious reason. Maybe they just want to make some extra money and they know something sells on YouTube, but it takes credibility away from things that I have that are physically documented, that I can prove to you, that I can show you. And furthermore, they're not things that the government has told me, hey, we've declassified this, have a look at it. You have to go get it for yourself. Nobody tells you this is now declassified. Check out our UFO files. Check out our weather control files. You can find that in the archives because it's not a cover-up. You just have to do the research to find that information. And then when you find it, keep a hold of it. That's what my show is based on. More than anything else is objectivity and hard documentation for what I'm saying. Anything else is a pattern of information that we can use well-controlled speculation to find out what is going to come next, whether it's on UFOs or pedophilia or QAnon, whatever the case might be. So with that being said, everything that you've described tonight, which has been beautifully spoken, by the way, you've really summed up all of my manic thoughts in a way that is very concise about this subject matter on the blue chicken cult, if you will. You sent me a story this morning about QAnon and how QAnon has now teamed up with a cult leader, a literal cult leader, Jay-Z Knight, otherwise known as the warrior god from Atlantis named Ramtha, that she supposedly channels. This woman is a multi-millionaire con artist. She is a literal cult leader. And now QAnon has merged with a literal cult leader. So you keep that in mind for a second, and you just briefly hit the rewind button, and you go back and you look at QAnon a couple of months ago, posting something about disclosure and how it was like 4 or 5 words. It said something like, you know, disclosure is real, or they're here. I don't know, something stupid like that. And people loved it. They ate it up. Oh my God, QAnon is telling us the truth. The secret space program is real. It's all real, 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 real. And then QAnon merges with an actual cult leader, and you start to see the telltale signs of what is otherwise very credible information and research and investigation. You know, people like, I don't know, just a couple examples, people like Robert Schoch, people like Jim Mars, people that I personally trusted, people like Freddie Silva. And all that information gets overlooked for the hype and the sensationalism
And to add to that, Ryan, it almost tarnishes the work that they've done beforehand as well, because everything then has that kind of it has that stigma attached to it, because these people have almost hijacked these topics.
Precisely, and that's why I think not fully 100%, but a tiny part of that community is controlled opposition that is organized not by some government or some agency, but maybe by some sect somewhere that doesn't really like what real researchers are doing. So they create, maybe even for fun, for something to do. They've got money to blow. So let's create a tiny psyop within the UFO community, within the conspiracy community more specifically. Let's create a tiny little psychological operation to distract people from information that is credible and things that are well documented. And let's play on human instinct to peer into the unknown. And we'll promote people and give them money and finance and allow them to operate so that they can tell stories about mysterious blue orbs and mysterious trips to Antarctica and the moon, none of which has been proven, none of which there is any documentation. It's just a story. But because of human desire to know about the unknown, those stories sell. And hard documentation doesn't sell because it's a hard slap in the face. This is reality. And so if you tell someone this is reality, it's really hard to deal with. Genetically modified foods, weather control, all of this stuff is real. It's not fear porn. It's just information. I don't really want to give my money to somebody who's telling me that there's a bunch of bad stuff going on, but I will give my money to somebody who tells me there's bad stuff going on, but there's also an alliance, and they're fighting back against this bad stuff, and there are white hats and a white dragon society, and there's going to be a financial reset, so buy Iraqi dinars or something like that. I've heard that a lot, that reset thing. It's a con, and if you don't see it, which I myself, like you, Kev, for a long time with David Wilcock, he has a lot of really credible stuff. And then he starts pumping out this garbage about blue avians and an alliance, and he just kind of diverged. And I'm not saying that these people like David Wilcock or Corey Good are some government plant. I don't think that. I think that they are people. I've always said Wilcock is just a ringleader. Corey Good might actually be a plant. Emery Smith is a useful idiot, and Jordan Sather is a useful idiot. And they're just using each other and using the community and feeding people what they want to hear, just like the QAnon bot, in my opinion, a bot, AI type of a thing, in order to receive more information, what people want to hear, including money they get with that, and then they give them more information. And it's like, I was thinking, there's not actually another whistleblower I was talking to the other day, and his name's Bob, and Bob was telling me about these red chickens, and you guys need to give us some money so we can get Bob out of poverty, so we can get Bob up here on stage to talk. Who is buying this garbage? A couple people, mentally ill people, unfortunately people like myself who want to believe, not based on faith, but I just want information, and we fall into that trap, and then people that know that it's just fantasy and they just play along because it's fun. And that's why you get people that go to events and conferences and they just have fun and they wear the glittery outfits and they dress up in weird costumes, and then the media comes and they take pictures of those people. And why do they do that? Because those people are attention grabbers, and the media wants to discredit a real investigation, a real commentary on things like UFOs. So, when I go to a conference, I've seen Vice there, and they take pictures of the people that look the weirdest. They don't go up to the people in the suits with the hard documentation for what they're presenting and ask them real questions. They go up to the people that are stoned out of their mind, that are wearing, like some weird shaman outfit, and they start asking them questions, and then they put that in the paper, and now everybody thinks the UFO community is full of a bunch of weird, half-baked hippies. And that's not the reality, and I don't like being grouped into that. So, yeah, it's a personal matter for me, and I know it's a personal matter for a lot of other people. We don't like being grouped in with the con artists and the scammers. We have real information, and we're trying to present that in an objective and moral way. We have an obligation to do that, and just because other people don't have any morality and no sense of ethics doesn't mean I have to submit and allow my work to be tarnished by the con artists. I digress, Kev.
No, you don't. You don't at all. And here's a little thought experiment for all the listeners out there. Think about whistleblowers, in particular military whistleblowers. In recent times, we can look to somebody like Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning. We can look to somebody like Edward Snowden, who came out and exposed all of the secrets from the intelligence agency. agencies, sorry, and we can see how they've been treated. Now, Chelsea Manning, right now, I believe, may be out by now, but was recently put back into jail for indefinite detention for breaking that military oath coming out. And it was, even though it was exposing war crimes, you take an oath. You're basically sworn to secrecy. You don't release anything like that. And that's why, like it or lump it, that's why somebody like Chelsea Manning is in jail. Go to Corey Good. He says he was part of a secret super soldier program. Yet he is allowed to tour around conferences willy-nilly, free as a bluebird, to tell his story. And why is his story always got new chapters, new episodes that come after a specific amount of time? You know, you see this a lot with whistleblowers out there. They'll come forward, they'll come onto the scene with an absolutely amazing story to tell. And then once everybody has heard them doing the rounds on all the various shows, myself and Ryan's included, if you want to throw us into the mix, and then you've got that kind of, you can show the curve, you know, the kind of attention, people following this, and it plateaus off because people have heard that specific information now. And then gradually the interest starts to wane and it starts to die down. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, you'll find that they either recall a memory that they never had before, or they'll have been given some new, secret, insider information from somebody who can't be named, and you watch their popularity grow again. And then the same thing happens. It wanes, and all of a sudden, a new memory. Oh, and now I remember this. Folks, they are chasing the popularity. They are chasing the buck. If you've got information as a government insider, you bloody well better get it out there fast and in one go. Because if not, you're going to end up living in an airport like Edward Snowden, or you're going to end up in a jail cell.
This is the Cam Baker Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, final segment of today's Kev Baker Show with my special guest, Ryan Gable. Now, you can check out his work and his podcast over at thesecretteachings.info. You can hear him broadcasting on The Fringe FM. And tonight, we've been ruffling feathers. Yes, we've been taking a look at the blue chicken cult, as myself and Ryan jokingly call them. And of course, we've incorporated and shown how this is really starting to merge with other conspiracies out there. Or after last night's show and the report that I looked at that compared conspiracy theories of old to what is now being called conspiracism, that is conspiracy theories that have tangible kind of evidence and things that we can look at and discuss, as opposed to pure speculation and unfounded allegations and baseless claims and things like that. You know, this takes us into the realm of QAnon, and we've mentioned that earlier on as well. And something else that they've used as in my opinion, a marketing technique to convince more people and to open it up to a wider audience is the merger of Christianity and QAnon. And one character in particular has been very instrumental in all of this, and his name is Praying Medic. That's the name he goes by over on YouTube and over on Twitter. And he is called Praying Medic, Praying, but I prefer to call him Praying as in Preying, because this dude is a predator. And man, oh man, does he know how to press the buttons. And you were talking earlier on about these, you know, people that come out and predict the end of the world and stuff like that, Ryan. Well, I've seen one video in which Praying Medic was actually talking about these prophetic dreams that he had, or as I prefer to call them, pathetic dreams. And he was basically hinting at the fact that God came to him in a dream and told him that Q had been sent by him to save the world. And here we can see how, again, they're playing on emotions. They're also trying to pull in people from that Christian kind of side of things as well. And it goes back to what we said right at the very beginning. Faith. A lot of this new stuff is purely faith-based. And that's why we more and more we compare them to cults. And the fact that story has come out in the last 24 hours where they literally are teaming up with a cult leader. And it's this same character, praying medic, is one of the ones who's been out to the compound, I believe. You know, we can really see there's a serious problem with all of this, Ryan.
It kind of reminds me of like a celebrity relationship where, you know, people don't actually love each other, but, you know, they're both celebrities, so they get together for publicity or they hook up and then it's over. QAnon and people like Jay-Z Knight, who have been around a lot longer than QAnon, now they're kind of like they're having like this celebrity relationship where QAnon is now merging with an actual long-time real cult leader, like on the level of Rajneesh or something like that. And if you don't know who Ramtha is supposedly like a 35,000-year-old warrior god from Atlantis or something like that, channeled through Jay-Z Knight, this woman who has this multi-million-dollar compound in the United States. And now Q people are telling, you know, Q followers, if you will, to go to this compound and, you know, the property owned by Jay-Z Knight. They consider like a new age guru. So then you get the new age word thrown in there. It's like this weird mix. But I read something really interesting in the article you sent me this morning. I didn't see this. You sent it to me, and I read through it. I printed it out. Listen to this. Kev, you already heard this, but if you haven't read this article about QAnon teaming up with Ramtha, pay close attention to this. Listen to what I say compared with what Kev just said. In one statement from Ramtha, so Ramtha, this 35,000-year-old god from another dimension, another time, is coming through this woman, Jay-Z Knight. So Ramtha said, and this is to the Daily Beast, the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, her mystery school, like David Wilcock has one now too. The spirit declares that the person behind QAnon, quote, is divine intelligence. So when I think about something like ascension, when I hear that word, kind of like disclosure, but I think of ascension, I think of the rapture. And when I think of the inability to criticize objectively and logically and reasonably so, things that I hear that are outrageous, that also tarnish in part the work that I do, or the work that Kev does, or just the general topics that all of us, including everybody listening, might be interested in, I get attacked, and it's almost like I'm a heretic. I tend to get that impression. And then there are books that are written by people, nice people. I've met a few of them, people like Von Daniken. And if you question the content of that book, as stale as some of it is, then it's almost like that book is the Bible, and you're also a heretic. That's a holy book. Don't say anything about the Earth Chronicles. Don't say anything. And that doesn't have to be bad. You could just say, hey, I don't really think that's all the information. And people get very upset. So you've got the holy books. You've got the high priests that we can't get access to, even at events, unless you pay to get access to them. We've got this celebrity mentality, people living like rock stars, all of it based on sensationalism and overhyping things and making claims on faith that what someone is telling you is the truth, because we don't believe that official narratives are true. We don't believe that the official government line on something, media line on something is true. So we turn to the alternative. And then in the alternative, there are psyops to bring you back in, what we call the second net. Judy Wood, when I talked to her, called it that, the second net that scoops people back up and brings them back into the mainstream community by basically brainwashing them once again. And that's what QAnon really is to me. So you have the secondary sub-reality in the alternative. It's hijacked. You merge it with the New Age, you merge it with the cults, you brainwash people, and then you bring them back into the mainstream narrative, that there are still really good people like a divine intelligence. And actually, people say, Donald Trump is QAnon, or my favorite personally, JFK Jr. is QAnon. And there's supposed to be like a picture. Let me ask you this. Have you seen this picture of JFK Jr. supposedly? on
Yes,
the beach.
yeah, I've seen various lines of, I've probably watched far too much of this QAnon and the debunk, enough to do me a lifetime, dude. It becomes ridiculous after a certain while, and yeah, the JFK Jr. one, still a lot of people pushing that. There's a character called Vincent Fusco as well. This is it's a big long story, but yeah, JFK Jr. is one of them. Roseanne Barr. We all know Roseanne Barr, right? I mean, she was
Q.
even claiming to be Q at one point the other day.
Q now is like this Slender Man type of a character, pale faced, no identifying features, and you project your fear onto it. Instead, Q isn't really fear, it's more of like a paranoia, and people project their paranoia onto it. There's a fire, must have been a directed energy weapon. Do those things exist? Yeah, it's on Lockheed Martin's website. They have DEWs. Might not be what you think it is, but yeah, it's there. Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they have those kinds of things. Does that mean because there's a wildfire, it was a directed energy weapon? No. Does that mean that energy weapons don't exist? No. But we can't just immediately take the opposite opinion because we don't trust the official narrative. We don't trust the official story. That's a really, really dangerous thing. And the people that really do cover things up and run disinformation campaigns are fully aware of that, and they utilize that. It almost seems like an instinctual ability to just go to another source of information that we find to be more credible because it's immediately opposite of what we don't trust anymore. And so they exploit that to bring people back in with the second net into this in this case, it's literally a cult. I mean, the whole field of ufology now is taking a turn down the road of a UFO cult where the end of it might actually be drinking Kool-Aid and committing suicide. I mean, these people like Wilcock, he's opened up a mystery school. People like Ramtha have like spiritual enlightenment schools. And you know what, Kev? As someone who has read a lot of books on magic and my show's even called The Secret Teachings, I don't profess to be a guru or a shaman. I just like the name of Manly Hall's book, so I called my show The Secret Teachings. I like a little bit of Hermeticism and a little bit of occultism and a little bit of magic, and those things have benefited me as a person. And if you can get some benefit out of David Wilcock's Mystery School, great. More power to you. I think it's overpriced, but more power to you. Go join the Mystery School. But you're not going to get secrets from David Wilcock, and you're not going to get secrets from Ramtha. They're cult leaders. Likewise, you're not going to get secrets from me. You're not going to get disclosure from me. You're not going to get disclosure from Richard Dolan, from Laura Eisenhower, or from anyone else in the industry. Even people I like. Clyde Lewis. I love Clyde Lewis. And Clyde Lewis is not going to give you disclosure. He says that outright. So you're not going to get disclosure from some of the biggest names, the smallest names, people you've never heard of, and people on YouTube who claim that they're QAnon or that they're a whistleblower. You know, I always wondered, Kev, let me ask you this. I wondered why whistleblowers don't, like if I was going to be a whistleblower, I would make sure I have compulsively everything I wanted to say. I'd have it well documented as much as I could, and I would have some kind of continuity built into what I'm saying, where, you know, if I end up dead or my family is injured or something like this happens, then you'll know that this information is very, very, you know, maybe even more credible than you could have thought before. So here's the information. I'm a whistleblower. It doesn't seem like these people do that. It seems like they contact egomaniacs on YouTube and they share information with them. So some guy who's got 1 million subscribers comes on and says, yeah, I've got whistleblowers and they contacted me and they want me to share this information about alien life with you. Or, hey, I'm a whistleblower because I was in the secret space program. Anybody can make that claim. Why do we believe that? Why do you think that, Kev? Why do we just believe those claims but not hard evidence for something?
It's that whole confirmation bias again, dude. And you know, this government insider, QAnon, you know, instead of, like you say, you know, instead of like coming out and announcing this stuff, and I get it's supposed to be somebody on Trump's team and all the rest of that jazz that goes with it, but to go to 4chan and 8chan, home of some of the darkest and most nefarious stuff on the internet, and to be posting this on there, that should have been a red flag right away for anyone. And you can even see videos of certain individuals who push QAnon posting as QAnon. And I say that because on one occasion over on the Patriot Soapbox, one of the characters, Pamphlet Anon, aka Coleman Rogers, is sitting looking at this Government Insider's latest post, and it's just an obscure bike rack. That's all it is, just a bike rack, a couple of bikes on it.
That's the post.
Yeah, that's the post. It's just a picture of a bike rack. Unfortunately for him, what had happened was his other half, his wife, had obviously been told to make this post, make it live. However, she hadn't. And the person who was co-hosting at the time on the Patriot Soapbox goes, "Where are you seeing this pamphlet? I can't see this on the QAnon boards. Where are you getting this post from?" And you could see the panic setting in on the other person's face, because that's when they realised that post hadn't been made live yet. Now, to anyone who doesn't know how 4chan and 8chan work, that might not seem like nothing, right? Maybe it's just loaded up onto Pamphlet's computer quicker than the other one. No, it's because Pamphlet is the trip code, the almighty trip code. And that's just a fancy way of saying password. And it's supposed to be a password that is only available to the person who owns the board, in this case, QAnon. And yet that post, just after Pamphlet had been talking about something that wasn't on there, miraculously appeared on the QAnon kind of boards. So that was one occasion. That was quite early on in all of this. But like you say, because people are so invested in it and they want to believe this, it's telling them the things that they really do believe is real, and it gives them that hope, that hopium that change is coming. You know, people will refuse to look at evidence like that. And if they do look at it, or if they do listen to people like me and Ryan, they'll do so with their eyes closed and their fingers in their ear going, nah, 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 because it goes absolutely against that bias that they already hold true. So this is how it all kind of takes place. And what I mean, Government Insider, really? You know, look at Julian Assange, not even a whistleblower, just somebody who publishes or has the balls to give a platform to genuine whistleblowers out there, like we mentioned before, Chelsea Manning. Now, if Trump was this guy behind this secretive poster, or as some believe it's Trump himself, you know, why the big rush to extradite Julian Assange back over to the US to get him in trouble there? And despite during the campaign when Trump was very, very outspoken about WikiLeaks, I think there's one clip where he says it hundreds of times, you know, in the last month of his campaign. When Assange was arrested, it was put to him in the Oval Office or at one of his press conferences, you know, about WikiLeaks, Julian Assange. Oh, I don't know anything about it. Nah, it's nothing to do with me. You know, Trump is very, very much for his military. And if anyone was giving away secrets inside there, the way that QAnon has been, and when I say secrets, folks, we're talking about projects like Project Mockingbird. How long have people known about Project Mockingbird? Well, we've all known about it because we've been looking at alternative information for years, and we've been looking at these declassified kind of programs and things like that. However, this demographic that they're targeting, this was all new news to them, Ryan. That this was something new. Mockingbird, oh wow, the media, it's been taken over. You know, we can't trust the media. And this is how they managed to instill and foment that distrust in anything coming from the media. And I'm not saying that the media are all truthful. We know they lie, okay? But it also adds further kind of weight to anything they say then. Because, look, they've been giving us this secret information that nobody knows about. This must be a government insider.
You know, it's funny that QAnon is this whole thing built around codes and seeing patterns, which I find kind of interesting because I like to look for patterns, and I can find patterns by
What has happened there? It would appear we've lost Ryan. Hey, maybe it's that secret government insider cutting us off, right? Folks, you think I enjoy doing this? You think I enjoy having to point out the problems within the sphere that myself and Ryan operate in? I remember the first time myself and Charlie Robinson had a bit of a laugh about the blue chickens and all the rest of it. It really annoyed people. And I really took that to heart, right? Because I thought to myself, wow, I've almost kind of alienated some of my own audience there. But then over time, when, when that initial reaction of, oh, wow, I can't believe Kev and his guest are really talking this way about things that maybe they've been looking into in the past, and Ryan is coming back now. Yeah, hold on 2 seconds. Ryan, is he here? No, I'll try and add him in. Hang on. There we go. We'll see if we can get him in here now. Mr. Gable, no. Try one more time, folks. Here we go. There we go. Ryan, did that government insider cut you off?
Yeah, they did. See, I could be deceptive and I could say that I was cut off by the government, but what really happened was my recorder died.
But I was saying just when you were away there, do you think myself and I was asking the audience, do they think that we enjoy doing this? This is absolutely horrible, the fact that the sphere in which we operate in, and a subject matter, i.e. the secret space program, which there is a secret space program, folks. However, not the version that's been sold to us by the Goods and Wilcocks of this world. And if they had just come along and, marketed this and tried to get a TV show or a Hollywood movie, fair dues, because it's a really good story, right? A really good story. And we see how there's been comics spun off from this. I believe it's $222 for the Cosmic Disclosure Sphere Being Alliance edition #1 comic. Why
is that a joke?
No. Why $222? Is that like in numerology, Ryan? I mean, you look into that stuff. Is there any significance to that number?
Well, Wilcock charges $333 for his mystery school, and that's what they're doing. They're playing on symbols. That's what I started to say before I went. And my recorder died there before the government cut me off.
Come on, we could have spun it there, dude. We could have I could have billed it in the title as a government cut off this show. You must hear this.
Oh, you can still do that, and then people don't listen. They just they post the show and say, "See, a government insider got cut off on the show," but they don't actually listen to it. So if you look at like QAnon, I think it's incredible that. The whole basis, right? You've seen that like whiteboard of all the connections and the circles and the lines. Have you seen that?
Yes, the Q map.
The Q map, exactly. So if you look at the Q map, it's all about code. It's all about symbol. It's all about projecting to the public blank slates for them to then project what they want from Q to project back to them. And I find it interesting that if I sit here in studio and I show someone I don't know, the other side of my studio, I have swastikas on my wall, along with pentagrams and triquetras and ankhs and various symbols. And if somebody saw that, Kev, they might think I'm a Nazi, or they see my Japanese imperial battle flag back here, and they might think I'm a Japanese imperialist. And they're looking for those codes. And it's the same thing with, like, World War II. There's no written documentation, at least that I've seen, nobody's ever produced it, for Hitler authorizing mass slaughters of Jews. And since you can't find written documentation of that, although people die, sure, Stalin had written documentation of authorizing mass slaughter, though. And since you can't find written documentation specifically of that, people say, well, he wrote it in code. So our narrative is still right. He just spoke in code. And that's what QAnon is doing. It's all about code words. It's all about code. But the funny thing is, Kev, what I was getting at is the people that believe that, the people that are the QAnonsense followers, can't figure out that Jordan Sather is putting on an act of like a professor with a chalkboard. They can't figure out that David Wilcock is just putting on an act. They can't figure out that these people are putting on masks. They're looking for codes everywhere. If I was to sit here and eat an ice cream cone, people might think I'm raping children. Or if I take a slice of pizza, they might think I'm raping kids. Or if I eat a hot dog on camera, they think that I'm raping little boys. But if I was to sit here and try to expose the people that are spreading disinformation, I'm told that I'm a shill. And then when they put on the mask, it's somehow overlooked by all the code breakers out there.
Well, the best one I've had is the fact, and it'll happen to both of us after today. I'll warn you right now, by the way, we are Soros-employed gatekeepers. Soros pays people like us to talk badly about Q, and Q tells them that. The guy from the government who tells people to post memes and just conveniently, tells them, all the followers of Q to go and watch these specific channels on YouTube as well. Isn't that interesting? How it's Q from the government tells them to go and watch Sather and Praying Medics and Pamphlet and Ons and all that. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that good of them? Helping to build up their channels like that, Ryan?
It is. I thought Q was part of like the transgender movement. It was like LGBTQ.
Oh, I've seen a funny meme of that going around. A funny meme of that going around. And I've got a kind of boisterous side to me. I like to trigger people, and boy, oh boy, if you post an LGBTQ picture and tell them, be careful what you're pushing for here, folks. Wow, it's like one of the best triggers out there.
There are so many good show names that I've used. LGBTQ Anon, QA Nonsense, QA Inon.
That's what I thought right at the very beginning before, I started to, not me dig into it. People still say, oh, you dug into Q. I really didn't. I just started to look for the people who were digging into Q. And that's what I went for to start with. We would have a laugh, Ryan. And I would say, this is like almost some AI kind of neural network that's learning on the fly, and that's why sometimes it's almost like broken English that you're reading in. And to emphasize things, they put things in what they call kill brackets, and they make the one character bolder than the next. And then what happens then is that this has got a dangerous side effect. There's a dangerous side effect to this, because just the other day there was a gay pride. I think it was in Long Beach area. I may be wrong there. But because these Q decoders had been looking at specific kind of posts by politicians, they were taking like the first letter of one word and then going for the fourth letter of another word and saying, look, definitive proof there's going to be a false flag. And it's actually had effect in the real world, causing fear out there. The police had to get involved, and this is the dangerous side of something like this. And if it was just for shits and giggles and it was just a bit of fun, me and Ryan wouldn't waste all of your time out there telling you about this. Crack on. But there's a dangerous side to this as well, and that's because it is programming people. It's brainwashing people, much like a cult brainwashes people.
It is a cult. Let me read something for you here to sum up this whole thing. This is my opinion. I think Q is a bot. I think Q is AI. I know Q is quantum, so you have IBM's quantum computer. They called it Q. But if you go back to 2012, former CIA Director David Petraeus spoke at the NQ Tel CEO Summit, March 1st, 2012. And he talked about the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. And to sum this up really quickly, he talked about computers in the 19th century learning how to do things, and those in the 20th century learn to think at a rudimentary level. He said in the 21st century, they are learning to perceive, to actually sense and respond. And that's what an SOCI is. It is a self-organizing collective intelligence that listens to what people want to hear, what they want to believe, and then it feeds them what they want to hear and what they want to believe. Kev.
Ryan Gable, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely amazing guy with an amazing show and an amazing knowledge set. Check him out on thesecretteachings.info. Catch him on the Fringe FM. I'll be back tomorrow. And wherever you are, make it TFR. Stay tuned for Lucky and Dr. Brooks Agnew, and dinny touch that dial.